Hello, I'm Ashley, the engineer at Andover Norton, and we've just had a customer's bike come in and he's saying that the carburation wasn't right. The bike wouldn't rev over 3,000 RPM, wouldn't do no more than 70, but he did say it got better when the choke was put on. He then realised when he got all the way from where he lived to the car park that he was using the choke in the wrong direction. However, we resolved that problem, but when I did start the bike, it still wasn't running great. If you've got a bike that's been running relatively well and it's starting to go out of tune, there's some simple tips that are really helpful that can help you keep the setup close to where it was and make sure both carbs are practically back in sync. So when you fit them back on the bike, any adjustments you make, you'll know you're making them from known good positions. The first one is the pilot air screw. You can check that by gently screwing it in. You screw that in until it gently abuts the stop point. Then you can turn that back 1 1/4 turns. You can set that on both carburetors. You can also see where they were previously set as well. One might be way out, one might be totally the opposite direction, one too weak, one too lean. But once you've set them both to the same position, you've got a good starting point on each cylinder to work from. The next one is the slide. Considering the modern premiers and the slides are most probably all CNC machine, they're going to be within a few thou of each other. So what you can do with these is you can drop the slide back in onto the throttle stop screw. When you've taken them off the bike, you can measure roughly where it was originally. This will give you a good idea of to where it was running when it was on the bike. You can measure down using the tail of a vernier to the top of the slide, which is sat on the throttle stop screw. You can then take the reading. I've set these a little bit high at about 1.26 inches. The reason I set them there is because I then know that if I start the bike and it revs high, I can then drop them back equal amounts, because each carburetor started from the same position from the throttle stop screw. That then gives you a known position. It also avoids you having to worry about putting drills in there and watching them both move together and making sure the gaps are set up, etc. You can do most of this on the bench with a tail of a vernier. I've even done it pretty well with good results with a steel rule down there, a little 6-inch steel rule to get roughly where I need to be. That concludes this part of this carburetor brief. I'm now going to assemble these back onto the bike, and I can show you some other ways you can set these up before you actually put them back onto the head to make sure a lot of the guidance is done prior to fitting them onto the head where it says you would normally do it. You can eliminate some of that so you've got a quick chance and have all the settings about 99% there when they're put back on the bike. Thank you very much. Stand by for the next part.
A few moments later.
Hello, welcome back for the second part of this video. As you can see now, I've managed to put the slides, the carburetor tops, all back into position. I've also wound in the adjusters at the top. When dealing with the AMAL Premier, this is one of the most important things you've got to do on these carburetors. You need free play at the top of these when you start doing your tuning. So what I've done is put them all up now, the slides are in position, and I can gently operate the throttle now and put a finger in there, and I can detect that they're raising and lowering together, coming off the stops at the same time. When you first set them up, you'll see that one may move more than the other. On this set of carburetors, one moves a lot more than the other sooner. So what I do is adjust the adjuster so that they then come off the stops at the same time. The other check you do at this position is at the full throttle position, you make sure that both throttle slides are clear of the bores and they clear at the same time, which they do nicely. When they come up, I can see them and they just clear at the same time. The other thing to do is make sure the chokes drop and retract correctly. Remember, when you're dealing with the choke, cable tight is choke off, cable loose is choke on. These are now set up On the throttle stops, I know the throttle slides are lifting at the same time, and I know my throttle stop positions put my slides exactly the same height within the carburetor body. So now when I start the bike, it might run at a high tick over, but what I can gently do is just reduce that down until I get a nice even tick over. Using the same amount of adjustment on each throttle stop, will drop the slides the same amount each side. I tend to leave the pilot air screws at 1 1/4 turns. Now the books you may read, and I've seen it in a couple of the manuals as well, that what you actually do is then once you've warmed the bike up, take one spark plug off, set one carburetor up. There is a flaw in that procedure, and some of you may have already spotted it. When you've got an even tick, low tick over on one, and then you swap over and do the other carb whilst the other carb spark plug is removed, when you put them back on, you end up with a fast tick over to drop it down. But what the manual says do is weaken or richen the air mixture as you drop the slide for each carburetor. Now, when you put them back in place and go to use them, when you go to pull away from the traffic lights, what you've inadvertently done is weakened out your pilot circuit. So yes, you're going to flame out at the traffic lights. Nothing more embarrassing than trying to kick a Norton Commando at the lights. So what you're best off doing is leaving the pilot air screw at 1 1/4 turns. You shouldn't really need to adjust it from that position. These carburetors are 260 main jets, going on to an 850 with unbalanced pipes and the pea shooters. I know from running a bike on the dyno that in the mid position, the needle will be running too rich. Likewise, I've checked his plug and it's very black and sooty. I've now lowered the needles so they're on the top notch, which is the weakest setting. These will set up nicely and this bike will take off like a scolded cat. Right, I will fit these, and hopefully later in the week when the weather's a little bit better, we will road test this bike. I did say to the owner I will put some miles on it for him just to test it, to make sure that it does over 70 miles an hour and it also does more than 3,000 RPM. Absolute confidence in that. I will predict I'm going to have no problems at all with this. Thank you very much.